Hey everyone, can you hear me? Hope so. Let's get started. All right. All right. Turn the audio off on my computer so I don't get a 10-second delay now, and we will get going. First of all, most important thing, I would like for everybody to meet Platter's mascot. This is Billy, the platypus. They are so glad to meet you. All right, so that is the whiteboard. We will be using that when we sketch a few things out, when we draw ideas. I've got a couple other views that I'm going to show you here just for orientation's sake. The next one is, make sure I got my keyboards switch going here. Okay, perfect. Next one is, this is my screen, and we're going to be live coding for most of this workshop. You'll see two tools here, and now would be a great time if you're following along live or on the recording to get these two tools installed, and they are pretty common ones. One is Google Chrome, and as you can see, I've got Google loaded in Google Chrome over here. The second tool is VS Code over here. So if I pop a tab real quick and go to VS Code right here, you'll see that there's a really easy prominent download here. So I will give you just a little bit of time to get those downloaded if you haven't got them downloaded already. The third view I've got, let me pop into that real quick, is this one. So I've got the stream up from Twitch so that we can do some live questions here. Make sure that we are synced. Hi everyone. And that should come through for you there, and you'll see it. So when we take a break, or when I see questions that I think are good to stop and work on together, we'll pop straight over to that screen and talk through stuff together. That way we can move either to the whiteboard or to the screen, ask and answer any questions that help to clarify the material today that we've got going. So this is a live streamed, live coded workshop. It's also the first time I've ever used OBS or Twitch. So bear with me while I get my bearings. All right, cool. So we are going to write a web page and a little bit of setup in order to do that. First of all, let's start a new file. Hello world. Good, we've got it. This is our first web page. We are going to save that, and let's see where we save it. I've got a Scratch folder. You save yours wherever you want, though. Scratch, new folder, intro to web. Create that, and we're going to call this file a very special name, index.html, right there. Cool. So, believe it or not, we already have our first fully functional web page. Just to talk a little bit about prerequisites for folks, there are none. I saw in talking to people in our Discord that there's everyone from pros that have been doing web dev professionally for 5, 10, 15 years, all the way back to people that are doing their first hackathon and in fact are having their first programming experience. I plan to run this workshop such that there are no prerequisites. We will work all the way up to a full web app from first principles, from a single text file, from index.html. I hope that en route there'll be material both for you if you're just a rank beginner, or if you've been doing this for a while, because we'll kind of follow out into some sidelights as well. But my goals are that we break web development apart into its few constituent parts, and then we reassemble those back so that no matter what you want to do next, whether you want to just build a web page with some content, or whether you want to build a fully functional JavaScript web app, whether you just want to be able to build a presentation page for your hackathon project during these 3 weeks, that no matter what those goals are, you'll understand the fundamentals of web development to be able to get that stuff up, and you'll know where to go next. And often where to go next, as you can see from this, let me switch back to the screen. Oh, sorry, I realized I was on the question screen and not on the computer screen. That one. As you can see, where you go most often is just Google, google.com. So, all right, without further ado, what I was doing here as I talked on the questions page was I was setting up a file called index.html in VS Code, and I saved it. And all we're going to do is open that now in our web browser. And we can do that by just opening a file. Just like you can open a web page anywhere in the world served from any URL, you can also open one that's right on your computer. So here, intro to web, index.html. Let's open it. Great. There it is. There is our first web page / web application. Let me close out a few tabs here so that we are clear. Okay. Here, by the way, was the VS Code download page that I mentioned while I was on the other screen stuck. Cool. Hello world. Hello world. Now let's save this file again. Oh, we got a problem. We're not live loading. So we're going to work our way up from this basic text to our first HTML page, and then I'm going to show you a little bit of a hack to get that web page constantly reloading. Okay, cool. So the first technology we are covering is HTML, and we can indicate that we're writing an HTML document like so. All right, save again. Let's reload over here. Nothing has changed. But in terms of the file that we're writing, everything has changed. We've got here an opening tag and here a closing tag. When you write HTML, every tag should be, well, almost every tag should be opened and closed like this. And the only difference you can see between the opening tag and the closing tag is this little slash here. Is the font size good? TinyCam. Which shortcut? Oh, got it. You guys are on a different combo. All right, so HTML open and HTML close now encloses our content. Now, an HTML page has two main top-level parts. One is the head tag, and what goes in the head tag is everything except for the content of the page. So this is things like metadata, like your title. So we'll add a title tag now, and we will call this thing, as you can see, there's just the file name over here in the browser. Blow this up for you just a little bit. And as soon as we add a title, hello world, and save this file and reload it again, we're going to see that that title now goes up to the top of the tab. So a little bit of metadata in the head, and now we're going to look at the second major part of an HTML page, which is the body. Body. All right, like so. We grab our content, put it inside of the body. As you can see, we've just got nested tags. It's tags all the way down. So HTML contains two children, if you will, which are the head and the body. As you can see, the head contains itself another child tag, which is this title. And then down here in the page content, in the body, we've got hello world. And we are going to introduce our first content tag, and that is going to be H1. H1 is short for header 1. There it is. Let's copy hello world into the middle of that tag. Let's save. Let's reload. There we go. Okay, so now, after all of that tag wrapping, you can see we start to make some changes that make a difference in the browser. In particular, what we did there is we took just plain text content, which, while it is parsed by a browser, isn't really meaningful HTML. And we've put that text content inside of a header 1 tag. H1 or header 1 is the top level title. And what we see as we wrap hello world inside of H1 is kind of the history of HTML in one tag. Let me explain just a little bit. So a long time ago, there was the internet, but there was not yet the World Wide Web. That is to say, there was lots of content on lots of computers. In fact, by 1990, I think there were on the order of 300,000 computers on the version of the internet that existed back then. So way fewer than now, but still a pretty significant technical achievement. One of the big problems, though, at this time was that all of this content was siloed. That is to say, it was in one format on one computer and in another format on another computer. And no real reliable way to exchange that content, to explore. So Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor, if you will, of the World Wide Web, one of the brilliant ideas that he had was, hey, we should do a few things. First of all, we should structure this content, and this was not a new idea, by the way. We should structure this content so that anyone browsing to it from anywhere in the world has a standard set of tags that describe the structure. And so when we put hello world inside of H1, what we're really doing is innovating on the internet and turning it into the World Wide Web, turning this content into something structured that that everyone can understand. Anyone with a web browser can understand, in fact. So there is hello world. We've got a title tag that tells us what this page is as metadata, and content in a header one tag that is the start of our web application. Now we're going to add a paragraph as well. Okay, so that is a p tag, and we're going to say this is the content of my page. Save it. We're going to see that it's not reloading again, and this is getting a little annoying. So here's where that hack that I mentioned comes in. All right, so we are going to add a metadata tag, and let's see if we can, well, actually, let's take a quick break here to talk about what we do when we program. If you are entirely new to programming, that's great. I want to tell you that most of programming is Googling, is efficient Googling, but is Googling. That is, there are so many tools and so many tags and so many different technologies that we use as programmers that a lot of what we do is finding more efficient ways to kind of store knowledge about knowledge. That is, I know where I need to go for a problem this shape. Let me go Google it again so that I can look up the documentation. So that's exactly what we're going to do now. We're going to look up meta refresh over here. All right, there we go. Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not often the best programming reference, right? So let's try something else. Let's try meta refresh tag HTML. All right, now we're getting somewhere. So W3 Schools is a site that will often pop up as you're exploring and learning to program on the web in particular, especially for HTML tags and a language that we're going to learn next, which is called CSS. But as we can see here, this is what we were looking for. Let us copy and let us paste. All right, so we've got a meta tag, which is HTTP equivalent or equiv to a refresh command. And the content, this is the value. This is how many seconds we want the page to go through before it refreshes. So this is a really, really cheap way to automatically see the changes that are going on in your web page as you go. We're going to upgrade this in just a second, well, in a few minutes, to a live server so that every time we save the page, it will automatically refresh in the browser. But let's start here. Let's start where the internet started. Okay, so we save that. Now, so this means that we're going to reload this page once a second. If we do our first reload over here, then if you see this little flash, I'm not sure how fast the frame rate is going for you, but if you see this little flash, that is the page reloading. Maybe a second is a little too fast, so we'll make this 3 instead. Cool. I'm going to take just a quick break and pop over to the Twitch feed and see if there are any questions right now. Any questions? No, don't say programming is Googling. That's fair. Programming isn't Googling, but a lot of the lookup for things that we can't hold in our head is indeed Googling. Furthermore, programming isn't copy-paste like I just did, right? But copy-pasting is often a way that we can find a new technology that we didn't know. We can add it into what we're working on, and then we can shape it into the page itself. We should have no illusions. There's no way to master all of the material and keep it all in our head, especially when we go into something like web programming, where we're not even working with a single language. We're working with 3 fundamental languages. That's HTML and CSS and JavaScript. But then we're also adding in all kinds of other crazy stuff, the entire browser and its API, some of which we'll look at today. Like TypeScript, right? And Sass and SCSS and all of these things built on JavaScript and on CSS. So the reason that I'm live coding like this is to show you that even when you become an experienced programmer and you do it professionally, a lot of what you end up doing is searching and fitting pieces in and shaping them together so that you don't have to keep it all in your head at the same time. Okay, all right. Yes, refresh definitely possible with a meta tag. Any other questions over here? Can I increase the font? I sure can. Let me blow this up over here. Maybe do the same. Whoa, that might be a little too much. I hope that that is a little clearer for you to be able to read. Also, notice that on the stream itself, if you haven't, you can full screen it, so that you should be able to see a little better. I've got a screen region going for the stream chat itself, and I'm not sure if I can bump that up without like totally hiding that pane. So I'm going to leave that one alone for now. All right. Any other questions? Is this Visual Studio? Yes, this is Visual Studio Code. This is VS Code. And just to show again, since I was lost in another view before, VS Code. If you just search VS Code, you'll end up here, and you can download and install VS Code. Cool. Other questions? Oops. There's the whiteboard view again. Oh yes, back to VS Code. You got it. Okay. Oh, good question. Can I talk a little bit about Platter? Yes, I will, but I want to make sure that we focus on the web dev part of this. In fact, I didn't quite get them done, but I have slides for this presentation, and I'm going to throw them up as a Platter app at the end of the prezo so that I can share them with everybody. And if we have time at the end, I'll show you end-to-end how that works, what we're working on at Platter in order to make devs way more productive on top of all these technologies. If you are copy-pasting, you need to understand what you are copying. Yes, that is true. Absolutely. Of course, one of the ways to come to understand what you're copy-pasting is to copy it and paste it and see what it does. This actually gets at a principle which may be a little controversial to some, but it really is. It's the only way I've ever seen people learn, which is it's a 2-phase process. One is, let's code this into our page actually. We're going to learn another tag right now, which is the ordered list. OL is short for ordered list, and a list, of course, has list items. So we're going to add an LI, which is short for list item. Since it's an ordered list, these will have numbers, and we're going to say the first step is make a mess. We're going to say the second step is clean it up. Okay, save. There it is. Make a mess, clean it up. Really, there's a third step, but we'll put it in parentheses. Oops. And that is repeat. Do not be afraid as you learn to program to do things the wrong way, to do things a new way, right? Tim Berners-Lee, when he invented the World Wide Web on top of the internet, didn't do it by following the rules or only using the tools that existed out there. He did it by thinking really hard about what was there, seeing how the pieces fit together, thinking about all of the people out there that couldn't yet use the internet because it was basically a power user interface, taking all these threads and weaving them together into an entirely new idea. So as you program, just remember that it's an exploratory an action. You're shaping the world and your concept of it at the same time. You're building your code as you come to understand code. So always, as you code, especially if you're just beginning, don't be afraid to make a mess. In fact, today we're going to make several messes and we're going to clean them up, and that's how we're going to learn how to integrate CSS and JavaScript into the code base. We're going to do it the messy way. We're going to pull those things out into separate script and style tags. We're going to have those tags inside of our HTML, and then we're going to pull it out into separate files. And by doing so, we come to understand not only what the quote-unquote best practices are, but the reason that they're the best practices. And this is, to me, as a teacher, is a really, really important goal. I don't want to teach you like the best way to write an HTML page. I want to teach you the things that are in an HTML page, and then let you be creative with how you put them together, and show you where to go look next to learn the next step. Okay, so hello world, this is the content of my page. Make a mess, clean it up, and repeat. All right, pop over again. Any questions about that? Nope. Okay, cool. We're good. Sweet. Okay, so this is HTML. There are I think it's fair to say hundreds of tags. I haven't counted recently. Let's find out. How many tags in HTML5? Oh, 110 tags. There we go. So there's quite a few tags, and we're not going to go through them all today. But yet again, now we know where to go look. We know to Google not HTML, but HTML5, which is kind of the modern standard for HTML, hypertext markup language. And you can go learn more on your own as you dive into web programming if this is your first time. But just a note about these tags. They do two things. They structure what would otherwise just be straight up text, but they structure it meaningfully, right? They describe kind of the semantics, if you will, of the content inside of a page. This is useful to the browser, certainly, because it helps the web browser to be able to render this content. The headers look bigger, the lists have numbers in front of them and are indented, but it also helps people and the tools that they build be able to understand and parse that content. This is a fairly big innovation. Remember, the internet before the World Wide Web didn't have this kind of structure in most of its data. A lot of it was just plain text strings being parsed back and forth. All right, so this is HTML. You now know how to write HTML. We're going to add another tool to our belt, and that we're going to do it the messiest possible way. We're going to do it inside of HTML. So the language that we're adding right now, we're going to add inside of a tag, and that is the paragraph tag right here. We're going to write a style. We're going to write equals and some quotes here. Inside of these quotes, we're no longer writing HTML. We're going to write a language called CSS, which is short for Cascading Style Sheets. And we're going to say, to make it very apparent what we're doing, color equals red. Save that. And there we go. Reload it over here. As you can see, we've now got a red paragraph. This is not best practices in terms of design, but hopefully it makes it clear what we're doing here. Okay, so let's add another paragraph. Let's get really tacky here. Here's another paragraph. We're going to make its color green. And we're going to say, Merry Christmas. All right, very good. Let's say, though, that we want this also to be red, like that. And we want another paragraph. We want this one to be green. Goodbye. Okay, so we're adding styles now in a bunch of tags. Let's say we want the H1, by the way. We want this font. So add another style tag here. And we want its font family, which is a way of saying the kind of typeface or the kind of font. We want this to be, say, These are some pretty good suggestions. Let us make this one Gill Sands. So this kind of style, by the way, doesn't have just a single value. As you can see, there's a list of possible fonts. And when the browser sees a list like this, it goes through the list and finds the first font that matches on the computer, and it renders the element with that font. So if we save that now, as you can see over here, we've got a different style. But what's happening to our code? We are making a mess, aren't we? So step one, if we're repeating ourselves as programmers, what do we want to do? We want to find a central point where we can introduce the thing that we're trying to add once. We want to keep it dry. Do not repeat yourself. So instead of having a bunch of tags here that are red, we're going to try something else. Inside of our body, we're going to introduce a new kind of tag, which is a style tag. All right, there we go. So inside of that style tag, we're going to say in CSS, we're going to say, just like we did before, we're going to say color is red. But now notice that we're not inside of a single tag here. Where would this color equals red be applied is my question. And the answer is, I don't really know. I don't think it will be applied anywhere. In fact, when you're writing a separate style block or sheet, as we will, especially when we pull this out into another file, you need something besides these properties and values. You also need to select what elements you want to apply them to. And the way you do this, if you've programmed before in JavaScript or C, or languages of that same family, should look actually very familiar. What we're going to say is we want paragraphs, the P tag, to take this particular style. And we're going to close that off. Just to show you that this works, and to introduce the C, which is the cascading part. That's weird that VS Code leaves that square there for a second. We'll leave this green one on for now, just so we can see the behavior of this code. Okay. Very good. So we save, and you didn't see any change. And that's because we took that duplicated code. This inline style is what these are called, inside of a tag. We took it everywhere that it was applied, put it in a single place, this style tag. And so now we have our clean content again. We can see the text that we're trying to mark up. And we have a separate place where we say, by the way, when I have a paragraph, I want to style it red. But note that this third paragraph, this goodbye, is still green. We've got an inline style here. Now, here's an interesting question. We have a rule down here, a CSS rule, which would apply to this paragraph tag. And we have an inline style, which has a different color, which also applies since it's an inline style on this element. We note that the text is green, right? The question is, how do we resolve these rules? And that is the C in CSS. That's the cascade. So inline styles like this take precedence over styles that are in a style sheet like this. Styles that have additional rules, like if this were for paragraphs and for H1, and we'll save that, we will see that our header is now H1. This takes slightly more precedence because it has an additional rule. If we make it more specific like so, and we say paragraphs that have the class of, we don't want to call this red. That would be mixing the semantics and the style. So we'll call this prominent. Paragraphs that have the class prominent equals prominent. There we go. We save that. Now we see, by the way, our style only applies to paragraphs that have this class tag prominent. So now our first paragraph, which does have that class, is red. Our second paragraph, which has no style rule that applies to it, just stays the default, which is black in this case. And then over here we have an inline style, which makes this paragraph green. Now I'm going to do something, and I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to make this prominent. I'm not saving yet. So we have an inline style. Now we have a rule that applies that says, hey, I want this thing to be red. What is this going to be? What is this paragraph going to end up? Is it going to end up green or red? All right, let's save it. Okay, no change. The inline style still trumps, right? And just to show you that, yet again, this is live, let's kill our inline style over here. Let's save it again. Now we've got our prominent paragraph that is red over here. Okay, I'm going to pop over for some questions. Very good. Why does the color apply to everything above it? How come it doesn't have to be at the top to make everything red? That's a great question. So when we talk about what the browser does versus the order of these elements in our HTML page, there are two separate concepts, right? So the thing that we're not doing is reading the first line, writing it to the page, reading the second line, writing it to the page, reading the third line, and writing it to the page. What a browser actually does is it loads this HTML page as it finds important things like linked style sheets and JavaScript, which we'll add in just a second. It will go out and fetch those from the network if necessary, load them, and start to apply them. But it's not just a pure linear order. So we don't have to put the style above elements, because what the browser is really doing is figuring out the structure of the page, is cascading these style rules over that structure so it knows what color it needs to paint these elements on the screen, and then going through and rendering and painting them on the screen. So it's not just an imperative set of lines of code like you would expect, like in C++, for instance, where I do this thing, I print to the screen, then I change something. It's a declarative language. We're saying, hey, here's the structure, here's the style sheet, these are the styles I want to apply in different situations. Can you paint that thing for me? And that's why these don't have to be in order. I hope that helps to answer the question. Why is it hard to use a separate cascading style sheet when you have Bootstrap? I'm going to skip that question for now, only because I really want to target and I want to focus on just these fundamental web technologies to start, especially for those people that haven't built a web page first. That's a great question, and if we have time, I want to get to it at the end. Okay, sorry, I got a squeaky chair here if you hear something funny going down there. Okay, so we've got all of these styles. We put them in line. It got messy. We started to pull them out. We're going to do the same thing, by the way, with our font style here. So our header 1 is now just an H1 again. We're going to make a rule down here, which is for headers. We're going to make the font family the same rule. That should still apply. I really don't like this red header, so we're going to remove that rule. So we've got prominent. Ooh, interesting. What have we done? This is what we've done. We inserted our entire, sorry, let me demonstrate that a little faster. So, a little more slowly. So we took our style equals, which this is part of HTML, and we accidentally put it in our CSS. Instead, we just want the CSS rule, which is this font family rule right here. Now we just have that. We've got an extra quote here at the end, which we'll delete. And if we save that, oops, we should see, oh, there we go. We fixed it. We broke it, we fixed it. We made a mess, and we cleaned it up. Okay, so that is CSS. We're going to leave this down here for now. Those of you that have a little experience in programming are probably like, why are the styles still inline? But we'll pull them out into a separate file in just a second. I want to do that, though, after we introduce the third element of our 3 main languages, and that is JavaScript. All right, so we're going to do something. Oh, man, I haven't added an inline handler in a while, so let's do it on our prominent paragraph. Well, let's do it on our Merry Christmas paragraph here. We're going to say on click equals. Okay, so same thing as the CSS when we were doing it inline. this is HTML. We're saying, hey, in the paragraph tag, I want an attribute called onClick. So that's why we're still inside of these braces here, inside of these angle brackets. The content of that onClick attribute, I want to be, here's something in quotes. And this something in quotes is now in yet another language. And this language is JavaScript. And we're going to make this one pretty silly. I'm going to say console. Well, let's even make it more obvious. Window.alert. Ho, ho, ho. All right. And of course, we are inside of double quotes, so we can't use double quotes. We're going to use single quotes. All right, so if we save this, we should hopefully not break anything, see no change, but we've added an onClick handler. This is code that will be run in the case where a certain event happens. So the model for CSS was, hey, we have the structure of the page. We're going to add styles that, depending on the structure of the page, are applied or not. The model of JavaScript is almost wholly when a user interacts with the site, when they create a certain kind of event, in this case, the click event, I want to do something. So this is very different from most programming languages that you'll be used to if you're starting out writing like C++, right? Because there, what does the user do? They're not interacting with a page. They're running a script or running a program. And so it's usually a long time when you're learning to write code for servers before you start to build interactive code. Instead, you're just building scripts that do something and then they're done. In the world of the browser and of JavaScript, though, we start immediately with an event-driven system. So here we've added an onClick handler, and if I've done it right, which we're about to see, we will click on Merry Christmas and we'll see, okay, the page says ho ho ho. So window.alert is, by the way, super annoying if you do it in actual production code most of the time. But the idea here is we're adding code to be run when a certain event happens. And there are many, many events, just like there are many, many HTML tags, and many, by the way, CSS rules as well. I want to show you these elements, and then I'll show you at the end of the presentation where you can look more up about them. But there are browser events for every imaginable scenario. There are browser events for dragging and dropping, for scrolling when a user scrolls the page. There are events for when the page loads, and that one we are going to see when we start to pull the script out separately. So just about every conceivable thing that a user could do to a web page or do with a web page will have a corresponding event so that you as a web programmer can add interactive behavior, can handle that event to create the kind of application that you want for users. It's a good time to pop over for questions. Do that real quick. What's going on over here? Yes, the cascade. Okay, this is a wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Unlucky Man. It's an appropriate name you picked to share this particular story. Okay, so this is the root why many people who haven't programmed in the web are confused by, sometimes hateful of CSS. What CSS is, this cascading behavior that it has, there's a good reason for it, but it's the effects of the implementation of CSS, which are all of these styles that can come from different places and combine based on a fairly complex priority system. The effect is that it's hard, especially when you're merging in third-party code, to know what styles will and won't be applied. It's a global cascade. So you add one style sheet, you add another, which we will do. Let me pop over here to the VS Code instance again. We're going to add another style sheet here. We're going to say that no, we actually want prominent paragraphs to be green. We're going to say no, we actually want the font family. I want my autocomplete again. Am I not getting that anymore? That's sad. Oh, there we go. Okay. We want this to be, can I get some Comic Sans? No, it won't let me. All right. I always forget if this is 2 words or 1. Let's find out. Oh, must be 1. Oh, I give up. we'll take a suggestion right now. Whatever it wants to give us. Instead, we'll make it with something that will look very different. Very, very different. There we go. Our default system fonts. There we go. Okay, so it's pretty obvious to see what's going on here, right? We've got the exact same rules in 2 separate style elements, which you could think of as 2 separate style sheets. But because one comes after the other, it's the last one wins. These rules have the exact same priority. They're the exact same selectors. There's one that comes after the other. However, when you're working on a more complex project that's linking in style sheets from third-party libraries, and those are being linked in an order which you didn't write, so you might not understand it, understanding both the order and the relative priority of all of the rules coming from these different sources can be quite confusing. We won't have time in this session because I want to get through a lot of these elements, unfortunately, to really hop into the specifics of the cascade and how it works. But let me just show you what to Google here yet again. CSS cascade. All right. And this points us to another great resource. So you saw W3 Schools, some of the content of which is really, really good, and some of which is less helpful. One of the cool things about Mozilla's developer network, MDN Web Docs, is not only does it have these per element and per concept documents, but it also has some really, really great introductory material. So you, after this workshop, will have the understanding of the fundamentals well enough to go, for instance, through their Learn Web Development tutorial, and that will take you much more in depth on really anything that you want to learn more about. Okay, so introducing the CSS cascade. It's a great page. Talks about author style sheets, user agent style sheets, which are the default styles that are in a browser that ship with the browser itself. It talks about order and the priority. Basically, it's a 4-part priority system. You could think of it as 4 numbers separated by decimal points, where the most significant one trumps the next 3, and the next significant one trumps the other ones. These digits are based on how many elements the rule is applied to. They're based on whether there's a class or an ID, which we haven't looked at yet. The other thing you can do besides having a class is you can actually have an ID on an element. The difference between these 2 things in HTML is that a class can be on any number of elements in a page, and an ID should only be on one element of a page. It's an identifying string. So if we make this paragraph what's the content here? This is the content of my page. So we'll make the ID here content. That's obviously not very creative. We'll make our rule down here. You use dot, by the way, for classes, and you use the hashtag like this for IDs. So we're going to say paragraph with an ID of content. We want its color to be blue. Pop back over here. Let's save that. All right, so you can see it's blue. We might have expected that based on the fact that this rule comes after this one. So that makes it red. But note that there's another rule that comes after it, which is that the prominent paragraph should actually be green. But the reason that this rule is applied, even though it's in the middle, is because styles applied to elements by ID take priority over those applied via class. So this is where the cascade can start to get confusing. Now, really simple style sheets here. Imagine you've got thousands of lines of CSS written by multiple parties. You can imagine how difficult things get. The hack that was mentioned in the in the question, in the comment, was, hey, we can also do this. Important. And when we do this, we're basically saying, hey, I don't care what's going on with the rest of the style cascade. I want my style to apply no matter what. Now, you can imagine this has issues too. What happens, for instance, if somebody in the style sheet that they vendored to you puts important? All right, now we're in trouble, right? Now our important doesn't apply. So first of all, if you're writing a CSS library or something people are going to use, don't use important. Try to scope your styles as much as possible to the elements that they're supposed to apply to, and do so at the lowest possible priority. Those are your two things you should be thinking about when you're writing CSS to be shared with other people, which of course is any CSS you write, because you coming back in 2 weeks, you are another person, and if you've written bang important all over the place, then you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt very, very quickly. That's a great question, and thank you for sharing that. Super important. Yeah, that would be something else. Why is Calibri not in quotes in the CSS? Good question. So, as you can see, all of the items that have spaces in the actual font name have to be in quotes. The ones that don't have spaces inside of their font names can be in quotes, but don't need to be. So that's that. All right. Is it common when creating websites to create everything from scratch like this? No, absolutely not. And in fact, like, that's the main point of Platter, of the company that I'm the CEO and co-founder of, is that, like, once we understand this stuff, we don't want to set it up this way every time. There's the notion of a boilerplate, of a page template, of a set of standard files that you put together every time that you want to start a new project. As you learn these technologies, you should definitely be starting from a boilerplate, because it gets rid of that extra work. The reason that we're writing from the ground up is to really understand these fundamental pieces of web technology, so that when we get, for instance, a boilerplate from somewhere else, we don't just take it as a given thing and say, oh, here is the place where I insert my code. This is where I put the content, and then I'm good. The problem with that approach, if you don't take the time to understand these fundamental pieces, is that when something breaks in that third-party content you've been provided, when you need to make a change that's outside of the scope, for instance, if someone gave us a template for a page, and what we only had, which we will only have, by the way, in our React workshop, which we're doing tomorrow, is like a div here. Sorry. A div, by the way, is just a general division of the page. It's a kind of a generic structural element that says there's stuff inside of here that's discrete from the rest of the stuff in the page. If we only had this div element to insert our content, and we needed, for instance, to change the title of the page, right? Or if we needed to change styles in another file and we'd only ever learned how to write HTML, then we'd be in a world of hurt. It would take us a long time to do what would be a simple task. My ideal algorithm, I guess, let me switch over to, I'm going to gesture, well, no, I'll draw a little bit, actually. So hop down to the whiteboard here. My ideal algorithm for learning these technologies is what I call bidirectional search. So start from the principles on the bottom, but also start from your direct goals, like hack, right? Like, what thing do you want to do? So spend some time learning the basics so that you know how to put them together creatively. Spend equal, if not more, time deciding, hey, what do I want to do and how am I going to do it? And what you do when you work this way is you'll shoot off in all kinds of directions here, but your knowledge of the principles will pick those back up, and you'll be able to unify what you've been working on against this body of knowledge that you're constantly growing. You'll add more principles, which will then allow you to go back up and hack more stuff, right? You have more creativity with more elements. You can put things together faster. So bidirectional search is really the way I like to think about this. This is the reason that we're building our web page from the bottom up. Okay, cool. Oh, one more question here. How is setting an ID specific style different from just styling the tag itself? Well, let's be scientific about this. Let's be experimental. If you mean what's the difference in terms of the cascade, we are about to find out. I believe that the tag specific style will cascade above the ID, but I honestly forget. So let's find out. So we have an ID content here. We have a class prominent, but we're going to replace that class with a inline style, and we're going to make it color equals Rebecca purple. There's a long, sad but wonderful story behind the color Rebecca purple in web development. I encourage you to read up on it. One of the people from whom I learned CSS way back in the days, Eric Meyer, plays into that story. It's really a beautiful story. Tough, but beautiful. Okay, so Rebecca purple, there it is. All right, yep, so there's our inline style. Color Rebecca purple is now trumping even our content ID style. Hope that answers the question. Oh, still viewing the whiteboard. Dope. Yoink. Okay, let me just review what I did real quick. I added an inline style on the tag. Sorry, like I said, first time streaming with a multiple monitor screen setup like this too. I added an inline style to set the color Rebecca purple on this paragraph. I left our ID attached style blue, and then we did an experiment. We saw that the inline style trumps even that ID style, right? If you wanted to test another thing, of course, we could do important. There it is. There's our hammer that solves most situations, but then also breaks other situations. So, cool. All right. So we cleaned up an initial mess, which was that we were getting style tags all mixed in with our content. What we did to do that was we broke those individual styles out into a style sheet. But now, as you can see, this style sheet itself is getting messy. In fact, there are two of them, and they're in the middle of our content. It's kind of hard to tell, hey, what's the text that I'm writing or reading here versus the styles, versus, by the way, the behavior here. So let's take step one. We're on the clean it up part of the cycle here, by the way. Let's take this on-click handler, and for reasons I'll explain as we pull out the style sheet, I'm actually going to take this off of the element entirely, and I'm going to make it a page load time thing. This has to do with that rendering that I talked about. That is, if we try to attach a handler to a paragraph just in the script tag here, which we're adding, the paragraph actually won't be there yet when we try to attach the handler. We have to wait until the page is fully loaded, and as you can imagine, there's an event for that. So we'll build an event handler that sets another event handler on the paragraph once the page is loaded. But to sidestep that difficulty for just a second, we're going to make this happen at the actual time of page load. So we've taken our JavaScript back out of our page. We've got our clean content here. Save it. All right, there we go. Now this is going to get super annoying because it's going to reload every second or every 3 seconds. So it's time to do another cleanup. We're still in phase 2. We're in cleanup. We're going to get rid of this meta header here. Nice hack though it was. It got us a long ways. We're going to save our page. We're going to hit OK. We're going to reload. We're going to see that it's only when we reload that we get that now. OK. So here we're going to add a plugin to VS Code. Some of you may have it already. If you don't, though, this is a very, very handy plugin. It's called, I believe, Live Server. We're going to Command-Shift-P. We're going to install extensions. Command-Shift-P, by the way, is just a shortcut for getting to an installation view. But another way we can do that in VS Code is this little icon here on the left bar is the extensions view. And we're going to say, hey, I want Live Server. There we go. It'll drill us down, make it a little bigger so you can see. To launch a development local server with live reloading. What this is going to do is something even better than our meta tag. I've got it installed already, so I won't install it. But if you need to, there's these little green install buttons. And what live server is going to do for us is give us the ability, back over here, when we're in a page, it should at least. Usually there's a little button down here that lets you serve the page up live. I wonder why it's not doing that for me. Let's find out. Live. Remember, Command-Shift-P gets you to this open with live server. There we go. It gets you to this command palette, is what it's called. Open aha! So we need to be in a folder or a workspace. Right now we've just got a single file here. So what we're going to do is instead, folder to workspace. I'm going to pick this intro to web one. We're going to add it. Oh, you see that bar change down there? That means you're in like an active workspace, or you're in this case, an active folder. And now, if we get rid of that editor view now we've got our go live button. This is a confusing thing about VS Code. If you're just in a file, you're not really in like a first-class project, and it's going to hang you up a lot. So a workspace is defined by having a certain VS Code specific folder or configuration inside of a folder. A folder is kind of the cheap way of doing that. So we've now opened the folder inside of which index.html is, and now we can hit go live here. What this is going to do is really an upgrade for us. All right, there it is. There's ho 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 as we see. Notice several differences here. One, the text is different because I haven't blown it up manually yet. But the other is that we're not looking directly at the file system here anymore. We're looking at a server running on our local machine on port 5500, which is serving this file. The reason that matters is because we can get rid of the file view now. Whenever we change this file and then save it, hello, world, now it will reload that page only when there's a change to some of the code that renders it. So this is a much better place to be in, especially if we're doing a silly thing like window.alerting when we load the page, because now it's only when we make a change that we'll see that change in the browser. Okay, we're running low on time. I'm so glad that I got to a lot of questions for you folks. I want to make sure, though, that I give you a set of tools that really help you to explore the next steps for yourselves. So just to review what we've done so far, we wrote some HTML. We now understand that HTML is a way to create a tree or like a branching set of tags within each other, which contain your content, but which mark it up. That is, which add the structure and the meaning of your page. We've learned that CSS, which we added first inline and then broke out as a style element, a separate style element, and which will, if we have time, also change into a file. We've learned that that's the thing that allows you to make drastic differences in the appearance of your page. And then third, we've started just a little bit to add JavaScript, which is the way to add interactive behavior to respond to users using your web page in order to undertake certain actions on their behalf. In this case, to do the wonderful action of alerting on the window, ho ho ho. Yes, so the tool I want to show you, though, is a very important one on the browser. And that is the actual dev tools. So this whole time we've been rendering this page. And by the way, the whole time before, a long time ago, there was a tool called Firebug that was added to the web browser. We were just looking at the results. We weren't looking at the process, what the browser is actually doing. When we pop open these dev tools, which I did with Command-Option-I on Mac, and which I believe would be Control-Alt-I on other operating systems, it pops open these dev tools, which have, I mean, you could spend 5 hours in a workshop just learning what these do. But to give you the summary, there's elements here. These are the elements of the page. There's a JavaScript console where you can write your own JavaScript and explore that language with autocomplete. Window alert. Look at that. There we go. You can see all the different source files in your page. In this case, it's just one since we haven't separated out our files yet. You can see the requests that each page is making, and you can log them and see how long they take. Performance, the memory profile of your web app, the different parts of the application like local storage, which allows you to store data on a website between visits for a user, etc. There's a lot of tools down here. You can actually, there's a keyboard shortcut which should work here but doesn't in VS Code because they nerfed it. But you can open the same thing inside of VS Code, and you do so by toggling developer tools. Make this a little bigger so you can read it. And this is where inception happens, right? Like this whole editor that we're working in the context of VS Code, that we've been editing our web page with, is itself a web page running inside of a framework called Electron, so web page inside of a web page, which is the way that this editor is implemented. So one of the cool things about learning these tools is you now have the tools also to start to develop VS Code itself. You can hack on this editor in the same way that we've been hacking on this web page and get a lot of mileage out of it. All right, I think we're just about out of time here, unfortunately. They're probably going to boot me pretty soon. I'll answer questions, though, until they tell me I need to stop. Let's see if I've been told I need to stop yet. Probably so. Nope. Okay, let's hop into questions. All right. Usually for nav, LIH. Oh, yes, links. Right. So the whole point of the World Wide Web is not only to be able to structure your own content, but is to link it. And I will show what a link looks like. We're going to say we make a mess, we clean it up, we have a link which says research, well, which says go to google.com in order to research. All right, save that. There's our page load. All right, so links were like, this was a massive innovation in the history of the internet. The ability for any old user to be able to browse between pages that could be on different servers in different countries, across the internet, across the ocean. We take it for granted now, but this was a huge, huge innovation. It's not an innovation of HTML, by the way. Hypertext is what this is called, text that links to itself and to other texts. But to make it this user accessible across the internet was one of the major innovations of the World Wide Web. So now we can link from page to page, and now the structure that we've created in a single silo of content, goes across the world. It's huge. All right. Any other questions? Yes. All right. I guess we're about out of time. I wish we had more time, in fact. Anyways, I just wanted to thank you for hopping on. I hope that especially if you were new to programming or new to web development, that this was a useful walkthrough of the three basic technologies of web development, of HTML, which is for your content and for the structure and semantics of it, CSS, which is for styling that page, and of JavaScript, which is for adding interactive behavior. We've just scratched the surface of each of these technologies, and I just want to say that please DM me. I'm glad to hop in with any of you on a quick session in order to work through this stuff one-on-one, to teach you the lessons that you might want to learn, in particular about your content. But this gives you the basis to do that. You are now web developers if you weren't before. So thanks so much.